Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham is doubling down on her crime agenda for this legislative session. That's according to an interview she gave to the Journal, KOAT-TV, and KKOB on Wednesday. And an Albuquerque city councilor may be facing some ethical questions after she took a private plane ride to President Trump's inauguration. And federal employees in New Mexico are wrestling with the decision to accept President Trump's buyout as the Thursday deadline fast approaches. It's Thursday, February 6, 2025. I'm Gino Gutierrez, and I'll have more on those stories in a few moments, plus a look at the Journal's other headlines and Albuquerque's weather forecast coming up on the Leading News. This episode is brought to you by the Kirtland Partnership Committee. For 30 years, they've been dedicated to supporting, growing, and preserving the Kirtland National Security Complex. They work tirelessly to enhance military readiness, foster community partnerships, improve quality of life, and promote economic development right here in New Mexico. Join their mission to ensure that Kirtland remains a cornerstone of national security and a key provider of quality jobs and investment for all of Greater Albuquerque. Together, we can make a powerful impact. Kirtland Partnership Committee, proudly shaping the future of our national security for 30 years. With her final 60-day legislative session as governor now underway, Michelle Lujan Grisham on Wednesday criticized some legislators for blocking progress on crime and education issues, saying that she has struggled to get lawmakers to do, quote, responsible work. With more on the governor's interview, I'm now joined by the Journal's Capitol Bureau Chief Dan Boyd, who was there. Dan, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And Dan, before the legislative session began and now 3 weeks into it, we've known that crime was on the minds of lawmakers and definitely on the mind of the governor. It's been a cornerstone issue as the session has gone along. And during your interview with the governor on Wednesday alongside KOAT-TV and KKOB with our partners of Impact, the governor really doubled down on her crime agenda and how important it is for this legislative session, but she also criticized lawmakers saying that they're blocking progress.
Yeah, I think it was no surprise. We've known that this is an important issue to the governor, and she's making public safety push kind of front and center during this 60-day session. But today she was, I think even more candid about some of her frustrations just with that not being able to totally control who police officers arrest, how judges make sentencing decisions, and with legislators, I think she called on them to send a message a little bit more and express some frustration that some of these proposals haven't advanced over the finish line, and I think wanting them to do a little bit more during the session. And, so we'll see. I think calling out legislators certainly did not work that well last year. It does seem like, a lot of legislators have focused on crime bills this year as well, but, still a long way to go before the end of this year's 60-day session.
And Dan, there really seems to be a sense of urgency around the crime issue for the governor during this session. She mentioned in your interview with her today that she sees crime as more of a statewide issue, not just an urban issue contained to cities like Albuquerque.
Albuquerque's the biggest city, so by virtue of just that, your risks are exacerbated here because you've got more people, more retail, more drugs, more stuff going on. But all you have to look is that the violent crime increase in Las Cruces, in Alamogordo, in Raton, in Santa Fe, in Espanola, in Taos, and it is a statewide problem.
Yeah, and that's one narrative that I think we've heard, and that I was able to ask her about today, that certainly New Mexico violent crime rate is higher than the national average, but if you take out Bernalillo County, the crime rate is a lot lower. It's still above the national average, but she pointed out, that Las Cruces, Santa Fe, Alamogordo, she mentioned a few other places that the crime rates have increased and said, this isn't an Albuquerque problem, and she's kind of tired of hearing that argument, which we have heard some legislators say, that the city, just needs to kind of take care of that and not to pass laws that the kind of one size fits all.
And another thing the governor is looking at, Dan, is enhancing penalties for crime, but she's getting pushback from lawmakers as well.
Yeah, certainly pretrial detention is one issue that she raised again today during the interview, and she's pushed for in the past, and that would make it easier for certain defendants accused of certain crimes to be held behind bars until trial. But, that proposal has not gotten a lot of support at the Roundhouse, at least among certain Democratic legislators who say it might violate the Constitution. And again, this year, I think she's acknowledged that's going to be an uphill battle to try to get that proposal advanced. So certainly, though, she's not giving up. I think she's also talking about a number of other bills dealing with fentanyl trafficking, felons in possession of a firearm, those kind of things. And I think the legislature is working on a crime package. Exactly what makes it into that package and whether that, is to the governor's liking remains to be seen.
And Dan, there really seems to be a sense of urgency around the governor wanting to get these initiatives done. And it could be in part to the fact that this is her last 60-day session in office. Senator Antonio Mo Maestas said on your guys' podcast, Rounding Up the Roundhouse, a couple weeks ago, though, that this last session for the governor is really a legacy session and a chance for her to really leave her stamp on the state.
Yeah, Senator Maestas did say that, and I think that was a spot-on observation. I mean, I think this is her final 60-day session as governor, and, starting to think about, we asked her today some of the things she's proud of, and she pointed to a lot of things, but I think this is one area she feels like is unfinished business. That said, I think being a governor entering your final years in office, you lose a little leverage, and I think some legislators are aware that, come 2 years, there'll be a new governor, and they don't necessarily have to approve the governor's agenda. So the question will be how far does she want to push it? I mean, does she want to call another special session if they don't approve all her bills this session? And obviously I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but those are the kind of things we'll be talking about here, I think, over the coming weeks.
And Dan, one of the interesting parts of your story dealing with crime is the data behind it. FBI data shows that crime rates have declined, but public perception around them remain negative. So it's almost like the old saying, perception is reality. Despite the numbers suggesting that crime is actually going down, the public doesn't feel that way.
Yeah, exactly. And my colleague Matt Risen dug up some of that FBI crime data, which shows that, New Mexico violent crime rate did increase over a 2-year period, but it's kind of plateaued or even declined, since then. So, but I think you're right. A lot of people aren't feeling that, and I think the public sentiment is one that need to get tougher on crime. Now, the issue kind of goes: should legislators, tap into some of that public sentiment and emotion and anecdotes in passing laws, or focus on the numbers? And I think the truth is probably a little bit of both. But I think trying to cast some light on the numbers, and that while crime might be increasing in some parts of New Mexico, it's also actually decreasing in other communities. And like you said, I mean, we can't pass laws just that apply in Albuquerque. They apply in all of New Mexico.
But Dan, crime was not the only thing on the mind of the governor today during your guys' interview. She also talked about education system concerns that she has, and even accused former and current educators in the legislature of blocking reforms due to conflicts of interest. What does she mean by that?
Yeah, that was something new she said today that I hadn't heard her express in the past. And I think that's a little frustration. She said that she can't just go in and take over a school board or take over a school. Obviously, there are school boards in place that make decisions on how funding that's appropriated by the legislature is put to use. But she said it, unethical or conflict of interest for current or former educators or superintendents to be in charge of House and Senate education committees, which was strong words that I hadn't heard her utter before. I did talk to Representative Andres Romero, who's the chairman of the House Education Committee. He said he was disappointed in the remarks, and he's a teacher at a Trisco Heritage High School, and said he thinks, that classroom experience that he and others bring to the legislature, is actually a benefit to the state.
So Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham with some strong words for lawmakers as the 60-day session continues to roll on. To keep up with all the latest news from the Roundhouse, you can check out abqjournal.com, and you can listen to Dan along with Megan Gleason on their weekly podcast, Rounding Up the Roundhouse, where they recap everything going on at New Mexico's Capitol. Dan, thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, appreciate it. Thanks.
Albuquerque City Councilor Renee Grount took a private flight to President Donald Trump's inauguration on the plane of Peggy Diascalos, managing partner of her family's real estate company, Diascalos Development and Investments, and someone who Grount describes as a longtime friend. But the flight and the trip may raise ethical questions. Diascalos is both a developer in Grount's district and a past donor to her campaigns. In an interview with the Journal, Grount said she did nothing wrong by accepting the invitation and even reimbursed Diascalos for the flight. Despite that fact, however, Grount did tell the Journal she will seek a second opinion from the State Ethics Commission on whether she should include the trip on her annual disclosure.
Yeah, so an annual disclosure is pretty much when city councilors have to disclose, what properties they own, what other valuable possessions they have, what boards they're on, what their employment status is.
Noah Kalabach is the Journal's city government reporter and has been tracking this story.
It is worth noting, though, that we did ask what the flight costs and how much the Diascalos were reimbursed, and did not get an answer.
Legal experts noted that public officials must avoid not only improper actions, but also the appearance of impropriety. The Albuquerque City Clerk's office declined to comment, citing potential ethics board involvement. Flight records show a jet registered to the Diascalos company flew from Albuquerque to Baltimore around the time of the inauguration, returning just before a city council meeting. The cost of a small private flight could range from $70,000 to $80,000, though owning the plane may reduce expenses. In contrast, a first-class commercial ticket for the same trip costs about $1,200 to $2,000. The deadline for federal employees to accept President Donald Trump's, quote, buyout offer is Thursday, potentially impacting 20,000 workers here in New Mexico. The initiative, led by Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency, aims to reduce the federal workforce by up to 10%. The offer, a deferred resignation program, may not be financially beneficial compared to severance pay from future payouts. For example, an 18-year-old federal worker earning $73,619 could receive around $73,372 in severance, but only $42,944 under the buyout. Critics, including labor unions, warn it could further strain understaffed federal agencies such as the Veteran Affairs and United States Forest Service, which are already struggling with shortages. Journal reporter Kathy Cook, who covers the federal government for the paper, recently spoke with one of those labor union leaders.
So I spoke with Randy Irwin, a labor union president, and we talked about, he's really concerned that there are parts of the federal government and services that it provides that are understaffed and have historically been understaffed. And some of those services are important things like wildland firefighting through the U.S. Forest Service, or healthcare and services provided through Veterans Affairs and through VA hospitals. And so part of his concern is, what if a bunch of the workers employed in sort of those critical roles decide, I don't want to, I want to take this opt-out. I'm being told by the administration they're going to downsize. He's really concerned about, the broad scale of this offer. He went so far as to say that it was really disrespectful to federal employees to offer such a blanket resignation offer.
Many federal employees are hesitant given uncertainties about funding beyond the March 14th continuing resolution deadline. A sample contract acknowledges that payments are not guaranteed. The Trump administration has also signaled stricter in-person work requirements and potential layoffs if not enough employees don't resign. Labor unions have advised workers against accepting the offer, citing risks that Congress may not approve the restructuring or fund the payouts. Some believe the plan disregards the essential services federal employees provide and could lead to widespread disruption. And in other headlines from the newsroom, New Mexico lawmakers are considering a constitutional amendment to establish legislative salaries, making it the last state to do so. Currently, legislators only receive a daily per diem and mileage reimbursement. Senate Joint Resolution 1, which passed its first committee vote 7-2 on Wednesday, would allow voters to decide on that issue in 2028. The proposal creates a 9-member citizen commission to determine salaries, ensuring lawmakers do not set their own pay. Supporters argue salaries would improve diversity in the legislature by making service more accessible. Opponents, mainly Republicans, suggest adding term limits as a condition. New Mexicans have rejected similar measures at least 5 times, most recently in 1992. The resolution now moves to the Senate Finance Committee for further debate. And in sports news, the New Mexico Lobos dominated Colorado State 87-65 on Wednesday, led by standout performances from Nelly Jr. Joseph, CJ Nolan, and Donovan Dent. Junior Joseph recorded his 5th straight double-double with 18 points, 11 rebounds, and 5 blocks. Nolan was perfect off the bench, scoring 19 points on 7 of 7 shooting, including 3-pointers and 4 blocks. Dent, despite a slow start, finished with 19 points, helping UNM pull away with a 38-15 run in the final 12 minutes. The Lobos now sit at a record of 9-4 and are 11-1 in conference play, played stifling defense, holding Colorado State to just 34.5% shooting. Rashad Mememba led the Rams with 17 points, while Kean Evans added 15. UNM also completed a season sweep of Colorado State, having won their previous matchup in December. With 5 straight wins, the Lobos remain one of only 8 Mountain West teams to start 11-1 in conference play, further solidifying their title contention. Now taking a look at Albuquerque's weather forecast. Today you can expect sunny skies with a high near 69, and this evening mostly clear with a low around 31. To keep up with all the latest news from the Albuquerque Journal, you can visit our website at abqjournal.com. For the leading news, I'm Gino Gutierrez.